Beatrice Gutknecht is the mastermind behind Badassery by B, a brand strategy consulting business for B2B service-based companies. In this episode, Beatrice dives deep into the intricacies of brand strategy beyond just setting it up, delving into the implementation and the critical role of accountability. Her story from hotel management to founding her own marketing agency, embracing video content, launching the Art of Branding podcast is filled with valuable lessons on overcoming societal expectations, embracing failure, and unlocking your true potential. We discuss the fears of public speaking, the power of small changes, and the importance of feedback and involvement from operational teams and brand strategy. Plus, Beatrice details the unique energy she brings to her brand, represented by her quirky sidekick, a kangaroo named Rue. As always, if you found value from this content, please like and subscribe. And now here's my conversation with Beatrice Gutknecht. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulas, and this week, my guest is the founder of Badassery by B and the host of the Art of Branding podcast, Beatrice Gutknecht.
Thanks so much for having me on. I get it. Like it looks like a complicated name, but so much easier. It's like
did I say that wrong? How do you say the name?
Good. So it's like good connection. So good connect.
Good connect.
Good connect. Yeah.
Good
Put
connect.
The two words together. It's perfect for LinkedIn.
Yeah. Perfect. Good connection. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here, Beatrice. I'm excited to talk to you.
Likewise.
If you would, for everyone, can you just tell us, your backstory and what you do?
My backstory in like there's a lot. Like, is there a specific? You mean for Badassery or?
Yeah. So Badassery by B. What is it, and kind of how it got started?
Well, damn. So Badassery by B, it's been almost 2 years actually. We're about to be two years old. And that started after a year of job hunting. Like it was at that time where everybody is like applying for same level jobs because there was like that massive let off of like VP levels, etc. And just hit me at a certain point. Like I had been thinking about it like on and off for years. And I'd have friends that were like, oh, just go get a job and, just get that steady income. The rest you can do on your free time. And, stupidly enough, of course, I listened to them. Finally, at that point, like it's almost at the year mark. And I was like, you know what? Why just help one company? Why, like, especially when they might not be listening to all the advice that you could potentially give because there might be X number of people involved, right? So that's where Badassery by B started. And so what I do is brand strategy consulting. So I help businesses to really stand out in the crowd through their positioning, through their differentiation, and really defining that voice that makes the business. So it's not personal branding, it's specifically for B2B service-based businesses like that.
Okay.
And cool fellow millennials that are like, yeah, let's shake some things up, especially, where people are considered, this is a boring industry, a boring business. I'm like, bet, hold my drink. Let's do this.
Yeah, that's interesting because I saw one of your recent posts and you were talking about boring businesses such as like a mortgage company or something similar that had a lot of regulatory constraints on it. So how do you take a business like that and bring out their badassery?
So that was a very interesting conversation that I had. I think this was like a month or two ago. And it is very much sitting down and like understanding what's going on, like how their business is run and what their values are, what's important to them, what their goals are. And then, okay, that's internally. And what's going on with competition? What are they doing and where are the gaps? Right? It's finding those gaps and linking that up with also what people want and what you're doing, right? Maybe it might not even be like people saying that they want it. It's testing that market, right? A lot of the times, like people don't say, we wanted a telephone, right? Before they existed. And then once they have it, they're like, oh my God, we could not live without this. Or moving from you remember Encarta, right? Like we had to go to the library, go through, check through, like and find facts like through Encarta. We didn't know that we could just there was a possibility of just going to Wikipedia now and just getting all that information. Like we didn't know that. So it is finding like, okay, what is that gap? What is that angle that other businesses aren't necessarily looking at? Where is that like you squint, where is that little blurred zone that people know they're still like understanding of, but it's like slightly different.
Okay. And so, like you mentioned, service-based businesses and really helping businesses develop a brand strategy. Um, like, what do you see as the main challenge that a lot of business? Because I've heard other like branding experts say, like the faceless, nameless brand is dead, and like people want to do business with people and get to know them, right? That type of thing. Like, what being someone in the industry and working with these types of clients, what do you think the biggest challenges are that businesses have in terms of developing their brand strategy?
A lot of it is in the consistency. So, businesses like you'll see them go through the work that either they'll go through, do up a website, and then do like they get a copywriter, they get like graphic, but they're different voices. They're different. Each place is like a different vibe. So from the inside, it looks like, okay, yeah, we did the work for this, but it's like a check mark. But from the outside, when you're looking at it, it's confusing because at one point it's saying you're very serious and you're all about authenticity, and then you go to another point, or you're talking to somebody on the phone, from customer service, and it's like fun, happy going, and you're like, okay, these are two very different vibes. It's not saying that they're necessarily bad, but you're giving off a different feeling at each point rather than one consistent vibe. That's why you have a look at Bentley or you have a look at Nespresso. Every single point is going to be the exact same vibe. It's going to give like, say for example, if it's an espresso, it's going to give that air of luxury, air of like, we're giving you that prestige, even to the people that they work with, right? They've thought about the partnerships and making sure that that aligns with that voice, that aligns with the values. So I just posted about this not long ago, where partnerships is a big thing when you're focused on your brand, right? Don't just, somebody's like, hey, let's partner up. Have a look at what their values are. Have a look at who their audience is, what they're saying, how they're saying it. Does that line up? Because it could go very wrong.
Okay. Okay. So then that's a big part of your strategy too, is just maintaining that consistent vibe and helping businesses kind of find who they are, and whether it's in their copy or whether it's in an ad or like a video ad or all the different types of marketing, is just maintaining that consistency so people really get to, I guess the the customers that will align with those businesses will naturally find them through that messaging?
Exactly. So, a lot of people think, that brand strategy is just simply setting it up, but there's also the implementation and then keeping them accountable. That's why we do the checks there, every 6 months to 1 year to make sure that each of those touch points are aligned. And there's the implementation there. So like everything that we've worked through, say, for example, if it's the positioning, okay, how can this be implemented in operations? So a lot of brand strategists that I see, not all of them, obviously, had come in with a design background, right? Rather than an operations background, which I'm sure, like you said, you were looking through my profile. There's a lot of that operations background, so I know how in operations things might not necessarily work the same way for getting that strategy really to click and to get that team's buy-in, right? You want everybody on board and to be aware of like, okay, so this is what we represent. These are their values of the business, even in terms of when you're hiring, right? Taking that through to the interview process. Do these people have those similar values? Because they're going to represent the business in whatever format, right? Be it posting on their own social media, or if they're on a customer forward, like a customer facing role, they're going to reflect that.
So does your work, because when I think about a brand strategist or someone like in the marketing space, I think more about just getting the messaging right and all the different ways that you advertise and you interact with prospects and whatnot. But now what you're saying too is with operationally, does your work go deeper in terms of involving the operational teams and like basically the way they conduct business and operate has to be aligned with the brand strategy as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about how brand strategy, like the role of brand strategy, because often it's seen as something that's put under like, okay, this is marketing, then under marketing, performance marketing, branding, etc., right? But normally, like the best structure is to have that chief brand officer, or like that branding before it reaches the marketing, the operations, etc., so that it can be integrated in whatever level it needs to be integrated throughout the whole business. So that way it's one succinct message. So we were talking about messaging, right? That is going to appear in whatever aspect of the business. So take, for example, on a very, very like minute level, the documents that finance are printing, right? Are they still going to have, okay, visually the same like logos, right? The way that they're communicating with, say, for example, the people for payments, are they maintaining these values, right? Their approach. Because any one part of the business, if the vibe is completely different, that's when it leads to negative reviews where people are just like, oh, this is what I was expecting, because A, B, C, D, E was one expectation, one vibe, and then F, completely different vibe, completely different perception of the business, and that rubs off.
So how, like from your perspective and the work you do, right? I can imagine it's challenging enough just to do the marketing and the messaging and get a company right, but then digging into the operations side, like how challenging is that to get buy-in from maybe these other departments that usually don't even think about marketing?
It can be very challenging indeed. It is a lot in that training, and not making it like a checkbox for people, right? Like making it more of, if the senior levels buy in on that first, it's easier for everyone underneath to buy into that, right? So it's just focusing on one level at a time, right? So say, for example, you get each of the C-level, C-suite. Okay, do you guys get this? Actually talk about what that would look like in the operations, in their day-to-day, rather than just like, so by the way, our values are X and our mission is Y. Like, then people just like, they glaze over, right? You do any kind of training, and often it's like just that tick mark. When are we done with this so we can go for lunch kind of thing?
Yeah.
So it's like conversational style, like actually just making it a part of like, okay, how do you feel about this? Getting that buy-in, even in that process, right? So building out a fresh strategy, that fresh brand strategy, talking with the team, because more often than not, they'll have those gaps. They'll have the gaps in like, okay, what do we believe our differentiation is? What do they believe it is? You know, to all the different elements. What do you believe our vibe is? Because it's like the IKEA effect, right? That works from a customer perspective, but also internally. If you're have a say in something, you're more likely to be invested in it
Yeah.
and actually do it.
Okay, so then that's a big part of it too, is not only, of course, involving those operational teams, but really getting their feedback and like you said, giving them a say so they are just naturally like they have a real buy-in, like some real skin in the game.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. All right. So now speaking of brand strategy, so you have a unique brand strategy yourself, and I noticed that when we first connected, is you have a sidekick kangaroo with shades and a baseball bat, um, and you are originally from Australia, and then you've lived throughout Asia, and now you're in Spain. Can you just kind of talk about like your where you're from and how that all evolved?
Oh my God. That is a story. But yes, I do have Rue. She is the most incredible sidekick. Like she came after the name, but she came from a poll that I did before I started the business. And I was like, okay, guys, so I'm thinking about, you know, there's a little emoticon, right? Next to that a lot of people have next to their name. That at that time, like I started seeing them pop up. Like I think there was Tislim who had like an alien, and there was like somebody with a dinosaur, etc. And I was like, all right, guys. So here's a poll. What do you think best represents? And this is like without like having the energy, like all of the presence that you see with Badassery, like even the videos, right? Like so videos, I have never done a video, even on like my personal social media, before March of last year, ever. So it was like a whole journey. So I asked them, I was like, okay, so picking out Australian things. There was like a koala, there was like a few other things, and there was kangaroo. And 80% of the votes, they were like, kangaroo. Okay, kangaroo it is. So Rue became a thing, although like I didn't have a name for her. And yes, I'm gonna say Rue was like, I was being lazy. I was like, what do I call her? Because people kept on asking, like, what's her name? What's her name? And I'm like, Rue. It's gonna be Rue. So it works. I mean, often people think that she's a he, and I'm just like, but she's like part of the brand anyway. But in terms of long story, born and grew up in Australia, the East Coast. Then moved to Myanmar, I think when I was like 20. around about 20, which, if you're not familiar, Myanmar is bordering on India, Pakistan, Nepal, Thailand, and lived there for 10 years until there was a military coup. To me, like, it was home. Like, Myanmar was home. I still have friends that were like family, and people who, they've adopted me like as a daughter, as family kind of thing. And so I did try to stay, but it's just the situation kept getting worse. And I saw that, like, opportunities wise, it wasn't the place to be. So because it was so close to Thailand, because I had been there so often to, go for shopping, etc., because shopping in Myanmar is not very good at that point. I was like, okay, so I'm familiar with Thailand. Let's just move here. Before that happened, like a week before the military coup, my father passed away. So also when I left, like, I went to scan my dad's ashes and took a break. I was like, this is just a lot to deal with in one time. So I went to the US, drove across 19 states. I need to come back because I need to, like, I need to have a round number at least. And then, yeah, lived there for 2 years. Had a lot of, like, uncertainty of, like, I just wanted to be somewhere and not have to think whether I need to leave the country or if I need to, do something with the visa or etc. Right? Like, I just want to be somewhere and focus on badassery, focus on what I'm doing with clients, and just live life. So finally, I decided last year in, I think it was like October, November, to move to Spain. And here I am in Valencia now. It was totally different. I mean, for me, this was an easy choice because my mom, she was Portuguese, so EU citizen, and my dad was Swiss.
Attention manufacturers and e-commerce sellers. Is fulfillment a headache for you? Whether you're fulfilling in-house and you know you need to outsource, or you're with another 3PL and you know you deserve better service, Easy DC 3PL can help. We offer personal service, fast response time, and we're flexible to meet your unique needs. Get in touch today and find out how we can help you. Right, you've got quite an interesting journey to wind up in Spain. Okay. So now you mentioned earlier, like, doing the videos, and before you started, you had never ever done it. And I was looking at your background too. You have a degree in hotel management, and then you worked throughout some different hotels as well. So, and I mean, just meeting you, or connecting with you recently and virtually meeting you and seeing you seem like a natural on camera and very comfortable, right? As far as, like, having spotlight on you. But what was that transition like, going from an operator to you having your own marketing agency and just being in front of the camera all the time?
That is a very good question. I love that. So yes, like, I've done a lot of operations, but one of the big reasons I missed mentioning it before that I chose brand strategy to get into is because every role, it kept on coming up. And even I had, like, people ask me, friends are like, oh, I'm doing this business, etc. Can you help me with, like, okay, yes, like, I've done work with, like, social media, that sort of thing, but they were like, oh, can you help me with a logo? Can you help me with the brand strategy? Can, like, to make the branding consistent, etc. It just kept on coming up. And it was through, like, being in real estate, construction, development, hotels. So even when I was managing the hotel for a couple of years there. It was brand new, like freshly built hotel, which I was starting in. And there was no like social media set up at that time. There was no like branding. And they're like, okay, we don't really have the budget for this, but because I enjoy it so much, I was like, all right, let me do this. Let me help you with this. And even at a certain point, we did get a social media team. They hired a social media team, but it just never quite hit. And I was like, okay, just like maybe we'll just continue doing it in-house. Like I'll train somebody in the team to make sure that the voices align, because like what they were saying, it was like cold and not really connecting, right? You don't want to do what every single other hotel is in a city. Like it's a tourist place where it's just all hotels, right? You have your choice of hotels. So why do what everybody else is doing? You're just like another option. Then you're competing on price or appearance, which is kind of it's subjective, right? So it's always been there. But I will say I still remember probably about 5, 6 years ago, wishing to myself, I was like, I really wish I was charismatic. It's something right now, like, I have people telling me that like in the DMs, they're like, God, I wish I had your charisma. And I'm like, what? What? So I will say that was a journey. One from when my mom and dad passed away, I made the decision to approach life as, if there is that opportunity to take something, like to do something, rather than like holding out and being like unsure, do it. If there's one part of me that wants to do it, to do it. Don't wait for other people. And that's led me to starting Badassery, to starting dancing like salsa without like, waiting for other people to be like, oh yeah, sorry, I can't come this time. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like now I'll just go. If there's something I want to do, I will just go and do it. So that was one thing. Then I had this amazing, amazing boss as when I was in real estate, who headhunted me. And she brought out the start of who I am today, just with that charisma, with that open possibility of being a badass, empowered woman in business. She started that business from scratch as a subsidiary of another real estate company in Singapore. So she inspired, like she started that whole process. So combining those things, I was like, last year, January, February, I'm seeing people starting to post videos. And I'm seeing like a few people here and there starting to send like voice notes, video notes, etc. I was like, fuck it. Let's try this. Let's do this. The first ones were, yeah, they weren't great. But I noticed one thing, that they were resonating a lot more than my other content. And I was like, okay, I'm onto something here. So I leaned into it. And the more I did it, the more comfortable I became. And the more I think about it, it's like, well, what's the worst that can really happen? People's memories are, it's pretty terrible. Like, we're scrolling on social media. I'm sure like 5 posts ago, you you don't remember that post already, like when you're 5 posts down. So what's the worst that could happen? If you offend some people, maybe they were supposed to be offended. Maybe they weren't for you. Maybe it's better that you offended them now rather than like a year into like working with them going, why did I do this to myself?
So it sounds like the combination of like when your parents passed and then you met this other like empowering woman that was your boss that had charisma and really opened up possibilities, all that just kind of unlocked this other part of you and just gave you, it's like you just gave yourself permission to really be you and step out on this what you're doing now.
So seriously, I think it's actually unlocking who I was as a child. I think, and this is like a big part of my why and how I present myself every day, what I move forward with, like Badassery by B, is that society has a way of like saying these are the shoulds. This is what you should be doing. So like you should be getting a safe job, saving money, and then enjoying later on. Or you should go and find a partner, get married, get 2.5 kids. Like there's so many shoulds. There's like so many things in that box that we lose what we started this. So the way that I see it, I'm bringing back the me before all of that because I still remember as a kid, just one crazy vivid memory. But I was looking at the TV. There was a lot of ads showing, etc. And I was like talking to my dad or something. I was like, I want to do this. This would be so much fun. I could think of like so many ideas to like link like two completely different things together and make it pop. As a kid, I said that, and like that disappeared for a long time. Like I was bouncing around and singing and making like doing creative things, and that disappeared between primary school, high school, all these like societal expectations that we have that we're trying to fit ourselves into, just so that at the end of the day, even when we're trying to fit into that, we're still comparing. We're comparing to uh, the people who are only posting the nice moments on Instagram. They're only posting the holidays. They're not posting like the fights they had or like the horrid food that made them sick for the first 2 days of their holidays, right? So that's the way I see it.
Wow. Yeah, and that's great. It's a great lesson too, right? Because I see that so much where people, like you said, right? They fall into a box and they're kind of, whatever, go down a path and they're not happy, they're not fulfilled, but and then they want to make a change or they realize they're not really living their purpose, but that they feel stuck, right? And coming from someone, right, like you said, you finally made the decision to break out of that and be yourself and follow your own follow your heart. Like what would you say to someone that maybe feels stuck in terms of how to make that transition and start really living more authentically?
I would say just start with one small thing. Don't look at the mountain. Do not look at that mountain because that mountain would be scary as fuck, right? And you're not gonna do it. You're gonna overcommit and then you're gonna like lose focus and it'll go off the tracks. One small thing. Because even if that one small thing, you do that every day or you make one small change every day, then that will be 365, like in a year, 365%. I think it was Sarah Blakely who said this. She was nope, my mind blanked on the on the quote just then as I was saying it. But she was saying something about um her dad, the way that like when she was growing up, he always kept on saying, "What did you fail in today?" And to me, that like hit big time. I never had that thought cross my mind. Like, what can we really fail in a day? Because that means you're progressing. You actually tried something. So even if it's like one tiny little thing, that's a win there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And again, failure is where the biggest growth comes from. And it is kind of counterintuitive because even going through the school and, I don't know what it's like in Australia or some of the other countries you lived in, but like, our school system too, it like discourages failure. Right. And, people are conditioned as they go through to not fail and getting answers is wrong. And you know what I mean? And it's almost like it turns people into, the opposite of that, where they're almost, conditions them to be afraid to fail. So yeah, I love that perspective too, in terms of seeking out failure and viewing it as a positive, because it means that you're growing, you're progressing, and you're really learning something.
It's crazy. Like same thing in Australia. It's always like trying to protect, trying to be like in that little zone, and it becomes competitive. You're trying to, you know, how can I outdo this other person rather than support them, right? You know, even if you take competitors, right? They don't have to be competitors, right? Like they're if people are going to work with them, there's a reason they're working with them, right? You and them are not the same. There's going to be some reason that somebody wants to work with you, and there's going to be another reason that they want to work with them, right? There's no two identical people.
Yeah. Yeah. Great
Just went
point.
down a random rabbit hole there.
Um, all right. And then the podcast, Art of Branding. What made you decide to start that?
So that was another thing. I was in a conversation, out connecting to people, like, starting conversations, and happened to connect with Elijah Dram. I'm not sure, like, if you're not connected with him, reach out. He is an incredible and most so many amazingly crazy, beautiful ideas. He's helps with podcasts, and he asked me one question. He's like, "Have you ever considered a podcast?" And yes, like a lot of people do this, but it was right time, right moment, and I was like, you know what? I haven't. Let's talk about this, right? And so we got talking and made it happen. So Elijah has been the producer for season one and now season two of the podcast. So season one, the way that I approached it was more in the interview format, but similar to like this one. Uh, but it was about breaking down the different elements of brand strategy. So we get like it's not just one like unknown, right? So each episode focuses on a different kind of element of what makes up brand strategy because there is so much. Same as like you talk to a social media person or a marketing person, they're like, this is a lot of things that we have to cover, but a lot of people don't really consider that, right? And season two, I was like, you know what, let's shake this up. We're going to make season two about how businesses have disrupted and how you can disrupt and shake things up. It doesn't have to be a table flip or like, doing crazy things, but it's like how you shake things up in your industry so that you actually stand out. So you're not just another hotel, you're not just another restaurant. So that's how the art of branding came to be. did not expect the amount of time on the back end that it takes, especially with socials and trying to promote it. So anyone looking to go into it, I would be cautious and be like, this takes a lot of time. Just so you know, be careful. Like, don't just commit. Like, know that this is going to take a solid amount of time and your commitment and a lot of conversations, right? Because the way that people go into it, especially as guests, like if they're not properly prepped, they're just like, yeah, let me just go into it, and they think that the podcast host is going to be just doing the promoting only on their side, right? But it's at the end of the day, most of the episode or a big chunk of the episode is going to be that guest. So a lot of the content is for them to promote about themselves. Like, hey, I just went on this podcast. We talked about X, Y, Z. So working with them, like helping, like, oh, here's like a bunch of clips that you could like use, etc. So it's a fun experience. I recommend it. It's also helped with my voice, my conciseness, how I speak, because I've listened to other people, how they approach their speaking style. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like when you're recording and you're editing and you're hearing yourself, right? I'm sure, granted, you instantly think of things you can improve. And that's how it, like, especially when I listen back to my stuff too, it's like, I should do more of this, less of that. And you don't always realize how you sound when you're speaking versus what, listening to yourself on record.
It's crazy. And I know a lot of people have that fear where they don't like to hear themselves. And I had that as well myself. I still remember my first job. I was a checkout chick, so a grocery store operator, like the person at the counter swiping okay, yeah. And you'd have the phone. So like if you need help or a price check, which goes to like all the speakers in the supermarket, like to ask for something, I would be terrified. Terrified. I'd be like, I'd hear my voice and be like, oh. But what I would say is I don't know. For me, I've just gotten used to it. I don't know about like for you, David, what's how it happened, but like it's almost like I don't even think about it anymore. Like, oh, this is me. Like I'll just see it from like an outside perspective almost.
Yeah, I mean, I was never like, I kind of reached a point too where I was just, and I don't, I'm a little older. I'm in my mid 40s, right? And as certain things start to decline too, right? Like you realize you only have a certain amount of time. So I kind of just decided, you know what, this is something, the idea came to me, it made sense, it's going to help the business. Let me just do it. And I've always been comfortable speaking, but I never thought I'd have a podcast. But I just said, you know what, like I am who I am. So wherever I am on video or on wherever, I'm just gonna do it, and whatever it is, what it, and I've got positive response. And I think, like you said, the more you do it, you get more comfortable, and you realize what you were afraid of, or that anxiety in your head, it just naturally goes away, and you realize, it's not that big a deal.
Dude, seriously, having that like click moment in your head where it's like this doesn't, not that it doesn't count, but it's like this too shall pass, right? Like having those anxieties or that stress about like how you're gonna sound, how you're gonna like mess up. It's like hell, 5 minutes from now, a few months from now, is it really gonna matter? Are people still gonna remember? Probably not. There's probably gonna be something else that's on. Like one of this might be too potentially political or controversial for this, but if we have a look at the news, for example, and see like the war in Russia, right? The news was full. But now, like maybe it's like a small little thing on the side. Our attention keeps on moving. There will be always something else that takes that front and center. Yeah, that's the way I see it. Like even the one in Myanmar, the military coup, it was front and center in the newspapers for a few weeks. And then everybody, like I speak to people maybe like a year ago or now, and I'm like, oh, so like the military coup, and they're like, oh, that's still a thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's actually it's even worse situation now. So that's the way I see it. Like, the war in Russia still going on. Are we talking about it? Maybe not. So
Yeah, yeah, like you said, right? Like people get distracted. You don't even remember what you looked at 5 posts ago, right? Life goes on. So, yeah, and most people suffer a lot more in their imagination, right? Than yeah, and I forgot that's a famous quote from someone. I forget who it was at the time, but it's like most suffering, majority of it is in the imagination more so than real life. So, like the fear of how you think about it is a lot worse than the actual real event. So yeah, just go for it, I guess is the lesson.
yeah, I'm pretty sure like there's like that's kind of a variation of like the Buddha, or Buddhism saying where it's like there's two kinds of pain. There's the real pain and there's the secondary pain. The secondary, like the first pain is not optional. The secondary pain is optional because that's what we're doing to ourselves. We're like
I
adding to it. The suffering,
yeah,
sorry.
pain is certain, but suffering is optional. That's the quote. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes. That's it.
Yeah. All right. Well, B, thank you so much for taking the time and really enjoyed this discussion. We cover quite a bit. So if people want to learn more about you and your marketing agency and all the different things you do with brand strategy and helping businesses, what's the best way that people can get in touch with you?
So it's just me working one-on-one. There's a few options. You can hop over to badasserybyb.com. That's my website. I'm active far too much on LinkedIn. So hop over onto Beatrice Gutknecht, Gutknecht, for the last name spelling. And elsewhere, there's YouTube, Instagram under Badassery by B, and of course, the podcast, The Art of Branding.
All right. And we'll link all that in the show notes for everyone so they can click all that and find you. All right.
Thanks
Well,
so
thank you so
much.
much for taking the time here, B. I really enjoyed our discussion. And that's all the time we have for now. We will see you next time.